Hello and welcome to Online Studio. My name is Jessica Arsenault and I'll be your host for this event. I work in the Learning and Community Engagement Department at the National Gallery of Canada. As we begin this event, I want to acknowledge that the National Gallery of Canada is located on the unceded and unsurrendered land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, who have been the guardians of this territory since time immemorial, in the present, and for the future. When we meet virtually like this, coming from so many different territories, I think about the responsibilities that we each have to the land where we are. This is the program for tonight's event. First, a short introduction to the event with me. Then, artist Arounna Khounnoraj will present the setup and the tools required for today's workshop. While you prepare your space, my colleague Laetitia will share an artwork from the Woven Histories, Textiles, and Modern Abstraction exhibition. Finally, we'll spend the rest of the session art making with Arounna. A few notes before I pass it to the artist. This workshop will take place in English. If you would prefer to attend a workshop in French, you can find the list of French online studio sessions and watch past sessions on our website, gallery.ca. Cet atelier aura lieu en anglais. Si vous souhaitez participer à une session en français, vous pouvez trouver la liste des ateliers à venir ainsi que les enregistrements des ateliers passés sur notre site web beauxarts.ca. This talk is being recorded and will be available on the gallery's YouTube channel in the coming weeks. Throughout the evening, you're invited to communicate your questions with us by using the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We are very many tonight, so be patient with us as we try to get to your question. Live captioning is available in English. You can access it by clicking on the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I would now like to present artist Arounna Khounnoraj. Arounna Khounnoraj is a Canadian artist and maker. She works primarily in Toronto, to which she emigrated from Laos with her family at the age of 4. Although her formal education includes a master's degree in fine arts, sculpture, and ceramics, her experiences eventually led to a career in fiber arts, with a focus on techniques such as embroidery and printing. In 2002, she started the multidisciplinary studio Buku with her husband John Booth. Arounna has also written 6 books and in 2020 released Visible Mending, which introduced mending and the reuse of clothing as a personal and hands-on way to address issues of overconsumption and fast fashion within the textile industry. Welcome, Arounna.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Hi, everybody. I hope that some of you didn't get caught in the storm that we're having in Ontario. I started doing visible mending when I had my own children and I was mending their clothes, but it made me think about sort of my time as a child. So when we came to Canada, we didn't have very much money. And a lot of the clothes that I had, my mother made the clothes. And then when the clothes got holes, she would mend them. And when she would mend them invisible because there was a lot of sort of stigma with being poor and, you know, the kids would make fun of you. And she would painstakingly make all of her mends invisible. And so when I started doing the mending, I wanted it to be visible because I felt like the whole, it was like a celebration and I wasn't going to try and hide it. And so I was using bright colors and techniques that really kind of sort of highlighted that whole. And I always felt like the whole was sort of like a vestige of the person. So you kind of had, you know, when I would mend like my husband's pants, you know, for some reason he'd always, when he would bend down, he'd always lean on his right knee first. So the right knee would always go first. And then, you know, on the back of his pocket, his wallet would make sort of holes from being in there. And it was just sort of interesting for me just to kind of have that kind of history of the wearer. What I wanted to do first is I wanted to kind of highlight some of the materials. So these are the materials that we're going to be working with in the class. And I did get some emails from people asking about materials, and to be honest, just use what you have on hand. You don't really need any kind of specialized material. When I wrote my book, this is the second version of my visible mending book. And you can get it from any bookstore, library, and it has all the different kind of things that we'll be learning today as well. So if you wanted to kind of pick that up, you could do that. So when I wrote this book, it was during the pandemic. And I think that it became really popular because we wanted to kind of do things that were off of devices and kind of working with our hands. And you essentially just need a needle and thread. It's so simple and basic. But some of the materials that I'm going to go over, and feel free to ask if you have any more questions about that. These are the mohairs that I'm going to be using. And I use the mohair for repairing socks. These are commercial made socks. You know how you kind of get areas that are worn out, but the hole hasn't really been created yet. So I use the mohair because the mohair is really strong, but also it's very thin. So areas that you're wearing, you won't feel it. And this has been washed many times. And the stitch that I'm going to show you later on, it kind of has a flexibility to it. So it's a perfect mend for that kind of area. So I find the mohair works really well. This here is kind of like a mending wool. So if you can't find mohair, I find this works really well. And this is also a really good wool for if you're mending like cashmere, something very lightweight. And I like this brand because you can get just like a small amount on a card. So you're not kind of investing in large amounts of wool. This here, I think this is about as thick as I'll go. And this is a tapestry wool from DMC. And DMC is a French company that makes embroidery cotton cloths. And you can get them in a variety of colors, and they're not very expensive. They're just like a few dollars. And then these are all just left over from projects that I have. And this weight here, I call it a fingering weight. This is also fingering weight. So I call it also sock yarn. And what's really unique about sock yarn is that it has a little bit of a synthetic. It's not 100% wool, and you need a material that has a little bit of synthetic because it gives it stretch. And then these ones are same thing, a fingering weight, and then a worsted weight. So this is very similar to the weight of this DMC, and this is just all from leftover projects. And when I'm working on knitwear, I like to put something underneath. So this is like a darning mushroom, and you can use a tennis ball. I remember when I was younger, my dad, when he was mending his socks, he would use a light bulb. So you can use a lot of variety of things. And then of course you have your needles. And there was a lot of questions asking about the size of the needles. Pretty much if the needle that you're using fits whatever yarn that you're using, then it's fine. You don't need, a lot of, I usually just have like 2 or 3 different sizes, depending on what I'm using. And also the length is very important too. If you're working on a hole that's a lot bigger, you might want a needle that's a little bit longer rather than something that is shorter. And a lot of the needles that you buy, you can get them in these little booklets, and they come, and it's kind of has a magnet, so it works really well. So that's pretty much it. Oh, and also I like to use like a little pair of snips just to kind of trim things when I'm working. That's pretty much it.
Thank you so much. There's one question about, is it important to use the same type of fiber as the garment that you're mending?
I tend to like to use, so with the knitwear, a lot of it tends to be like wool or cashmere or that kind of fiber. I tend to do that more so than use like cotton. And part of the reason for that is when things get washed. So you don't want things to have different shrink rates. So I tend to try to keep the materials very similar. But
Thank you.
there's no rules. You could do what you like.
Great. So we'll give a moment for people at home to set up your space. And while you're doing that, my colleague Leticia will come and share an artwork from the Woven Histories, Textiles, and Modern Abstraction exhibition. So welcome, Leticia.
Thank you, Jessica. So the work we're looking at today is by Hélène L'Espérance, who was born in 1971 in the US and currently lives in Portland, Oregon, We're looking at two works that are usually displayed together. One is on the wall, the upper portion of the screen right now. It is a knitting chart that has been drawn and painted. And the other one is a woolen sweater that you see vertically, but it is always displayed horizontally as if it were in a drawer. About Ellen L'Esperance, she learned to knit with her grandmother, then stopped when she was a teenager and rediscovered that medium in her 20s. And at the time, she was working as a bus driver in Seattle on rather dangerous routes. So she started to knit her own garments to wear them as a protective layer underneath her uniform. Today, we're looking at a practice that she has been developing for nearly a decade, and it is all centered around garments worn by female activists from the 1980s to early 2000s. By going through archival photography, Ellen L'Esperance looked closely at the knitwear worn by the women who would gather to protest nuclear warfare. These were strikingly different from the mainly figurative sweaters of the 1980s. She noticed that most of the activists wore sweaters sporting peace and anarchy symbols. She would then start to transfer the whole knitwear into symbolcraft, a universal form of knitting instructor. And in the example that we have in front of us, we can see the resulting knitting chart that she creates prior to making the final garment. Thank you, Jessica. We can see the fine lines up and down, each one matching one stitch. So in this specific example dating from 2011, Ellen L'Esperance looks at a very little documented action by a small group of 5 women that is called the Boeing Five. This was an action that took place outside Seattle in the early 1980s. And the title of the piece is Cardigan Worn by One Woman of the Boeing Five, Tried for Entering the Boeing Nuclear Missile Plant on September 27, 1983, sentenced to 15 days in the King County Jail for defending life on Earth. So tonight, we invite you to think of Ellen L'Esperance's inspiring work throughout the workshop with Arounna. We hope that the practice of mending will help you further the life of a beloved or meaningful garment.
All right. So I'll invite Arounna to come back on screen and on to art making. If you have questions during the event, please feel free to put them in the Q&A.
Okay,
Wonderful.
I wanted to show you a few examples of the stitches that we're going to be learning today. So the first one is a weave mend, which is very commonly used. Sorry. So there it is. And you can see it's on the elbows there. And I like to use sort of multicolors. And then we're also going to learn how to do, I don't have it on a sweater, but I have it on this sample here. This here is called Scottish darning. It almost kind of looks like crochet, but it's surprisingly, it looks difficult, but it's very easy. All of these are very easy to do. And then the last one, which I like to kind of do to show you, is this one here that I showed you earlier. And I call this sort of like a blanket stitch, or sometimes people call this like the spider stitch because of the way it kind of goes in a spiral and it looks like a spider web. And there's a few other ones that I wanted to show you that we won't be doing, but it's something that you can kind of look into later. That is called duplicate stitch or Swedish darning, where you basically replicate the knitting. And here's another example. This one's a little bit kind of difficult, and so I don't really show this one. Also, it takes a long time. So if you want to have a look at my sample here, so the weave mend is essentially what you think it is. It's sort of weaving. And this one here is done with one color. And this here is done with 3 colors. So you could see, and also you could see the difference too in the weight of the yarn. And that's something that you can kind of play around with, is determining the weight. Sometimes I'm going to show you with the seed stitch along the side. I find when you do the weave mend with the seed stitch along the outside, so these are the seed stitches here, and then there's the hole there. So there's the actual hole. I find that creating these seed stitches actually makes that mend a lot stronger. So I would suggest doing something like that. But you can definitely go along the edge and just do a weave mend. Like if you have a sweater that's quite felted and it's not gonna unravel, you can do it right on the edge like this, and it works more like a patch. So there are different ways that you can kind of try that. So I'm kind of use my darning mushroom, and I have a little piece of a sweater that I'm going to use. I think I'm going to use this red color because it's almost Valentine's. Let's go with the red. Okay, and then I just find that you could do this in your hand as well if you don't have anything to put underneath. I just find when I'm working, when you have it underneath, it just kind of prevents the sweater from stretching. You don't want it to stretch, like you don't want to use like a hoop or anything like that. It'll just make it kind of pull. And so you want it to kind of sit like there. And I'm gonna do this color and this green color, I believe. So I'm gonna do two different colors. So you're gonna start with kind of the, you have like the warp and the weft, so they go two different directions. So I'm gonna start with this direction first. And so what I'm gonna do is you wanna leave about almost like half an inch around. You don't wanna start really close to the hole because then it's just going to unravel. And you wanna start by just doing a row of running stitches. So you're going to go under, over, and then pull it through, and you're not tying a knot. What you're gonna do is leave a little tail about, I would say, 2 to 3 inches long. And the reason why you don't wanna tie a knot is because I find the stretchiness of the material, it makes it, it'll make it kind of pull and snag. And I'll show you what you do with those later. So I'm gonna do another row. And you wanna make sure your tension is good. You don't wanna pull it too tight.
A question while you're working. Someone is asking if you're working on the front or on the back.
I work on the front, but that's a good question because I wanna show you what it looks like if you work on the back. So here's a sample. This is the front of the sock, and then I did the mend on the back. So I kind of looped through all of the purl stitches. And then this is what it looks like. So it's kind of interesting. So you don't see the seed stitches. So if you want to do that, you can. So it's up to you if you want to do it on the top or the bottom, but I usually work on the top. So when you get to the hole, what you're going to do is you're going to leave kind of like a straight line. And when you're starting out doing this, what I would suggest you do is to leave a bit of space between each row. So usually when I do this on a mend, I put my string like right next to it like that. And then what I would suggest you do is do something like that, just a little bit of a gap, and then it'll just make it quicker. And then you can also add more strings later. It's just so when you're kind of figuring it out, you don't want to be working on it for too long. You're just learning too, right?
A few people are asking about how long of a thread do you tend to work with?
I always work with a length that's the length of my arm because that's as far as I can pull. So I usually work about an arm's length for anything I do with thread. Like if I'm hand sewing or if I'm weaving or if I'm doing anything like this, it's always an arm's length. I wouldn't go anything longer because then you're going to risk the chance of having knots. Okay. So I just have a few more rows. But yeah, normally if I were to do this, I would definitely do it closer because then I'll make it stronger. But for the sake of the demo, I'm just leaving a few gaps. So this, I have room for one more row of the straight. And a question that's going to come up is what happens if you run out of yarn? So if you run out of yarn, what you do is, I'll show you later, but what you do is you just basically leave the tail and then you just add. So you would just, let's say this is running out, you would just clip this off and then you just add another piece of string from wherever you left off. So I always try to finish a row. So like if you're doing anything in the center here, I would try to finish that. So be mindful of how long you have left because you don't want to stop in the middle of the actual weave. You want to stop while it's on the sweater part. Okay, so I'm just going to do a couple of rows.
Some people are asking, how are you choosing with the garment you have which mend you're gonna do?
You know, to be honest, it's really your personal choice. It doesn't really matter. Like the only thing I would suggest is something like what I was showing you earlier, the Scottish darning, which tends to be a little bit kind of more dense of a stitch. You might not want that on an area that you could feel. So like you wouldn't want to do that on like a heel, for instance, right? You want to do that on like an area that, so this, I'm finished here. So I'm going to just trim this a bit so it's not too long. And I'm going to just rotate my mushroom because I'm going to go the other direction now. And I've switched the colors. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do a couple of rows of the seed stitching. It's really up to you which one you want to do. I do find when I show you the Scottish darning, it does work better for a larger hole because you have to do a bit of a setup with this one. You have to do like the warps threads and then you do the weft threads. And if you have a really large hole, that could be a little bit fussy. So this type of mend that I'm showing you might be better for like a smaller hole. Okay, so when you get to the threads, so I'm going to be approaching them right now, the threads that are here. I'm going to just be weaving it. So I'm going to go under, over, under, over, under, over. And then I'm going to anchor it on the side there. Okay, and then when there's an area that you went under, you can do the opposite. You're going to go over. So over, under, over, under. And then you just continue until that whole area is covered. And like I said, this is just for demo. So when you're doing it, you're going to want to, oops, this is coming through. You're going to want it to be much closer, like the sample that I showed you here. So you're going to want it to be much closer. And this is the same weight yarn that I'm using. And then what you could do afterwards, after you've done this, is you can go back in and add a few more rows. I just wanted you to kind of have a little bit of space if you're following along with me. That way it feels doable.
Does it matter at this point where the tails of the yarn are?
No, it doesn't matter at all. They could be anywhere. They're going to disappear later. So under, over, under, over. So this is why I was telling you that the length of the needle is important, because if you have a short needle, then you're going to have to kind of stop in the middle. It's nice to be able to do the weave mend with just one pass. Okay, so we're almost done.
Another question that's coming up a few times is, did you cut around the hole to clean it up first, or do you just start working directly from the hole as it is?
You know, with sweaters, I definitely clean them up. I find when there's like little bits of yarn and stuff, it can kind of get in the way. So I do clean up the hole. Like the next mend that I'm going to show you is going to be on this sweater here. And so usually I try to make sure that there's nothing. So there's the hole. I make sure that there's nothing kind of coming through, that it's a pretty clean hole. Let me know if I get off camera. I find like I keep sliding it towards me. I think I should move my camera down a bit.
We'll let you know. For now, we see well.
Well, I wanted to show you a trick. When you get kind of to the end of your tail, sometimes because you're using like a darning needle, they have a pretty big eye. And sometimes you find yourself, it unthreads itself. So what you do is you take your needle and you kind of stab it like this. This is the short end of the tail. And then you pull the thread down like this. And then see, it's locked in place, so it won't come out. And I find that really helpful when you get to the end. It's kind of a bookbinding trick. Okay, so then this is the end of the weave. So you could see that it almost forms like another kind of layer of fabric on top. And then I will finish off by doing the running stitches. Do one more row. I find the seat stitch is really important. I find a lot of people don't do the seat stitches when they do the weave mend, and they just go really close to the edge. And I find like that's okay if you have a felted sweater, but if you don't, it will kind of come apart.
Several participants are asking where you find the darning mushroom.
Well, I used to sell them. We used to make them, but we just stopped just a couple weeks ago. We've sold thousands of them, and then we just kind of got burnt out. Maybe in the future, but I really doubt it. But you could find them. I mean, in like secondhand stores, you'll be able to find them. They have a lot of darning mushrooms. Because mending was such a big thing back then. You could definitely find it. And a lot of makers are selling it too. I would just search, you'll find them online. So this is our front. And now I'm going to show you how we deal. So you could see up close, it's a little bit open, but you can add a few more rows. Like if you go back in, you can kind of just thread it in between and it'll make it thicker. You could do that later. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to push this needle to the back. So this is the back here. And then you're going to take the tail and you're going to just stitch it in the back here, under, over, under, over. I would say about an inch, like that. That's pretty good. And then you're going to pull this through. And then you're going to just snip this off. And so there's the tail's gone. And then for a tail that is already on, you want to thread it and then push it through. and this will not come apart. And then when this gets washed, it'll just kind of felt itself, the tail. So not to worry. I've had plenty of sweaters go in the wash after it's been mended, and it's perfectly fine. Nothing comes apart. So you just pull that. And then you just do that for all of your tails. I could just quickly do these ones. I find if you find that you've made your tail really short, a trick is to stick the needle already in the garment like this. Okay, and then thread it. And then pull it through. Because sometimes you've left too short of a tail. Okay, so that's pretty much what you do. So if you ran out of yarn, all you would do is just stop and then just weave it through again on the new piece. Does anybody have any questions about the weave mend? And then you can kind of play around with different patterns too. Like this is like a twill. And you can try different weaving patterns. So
some of the questions that came up, some people were asking, could you use this type of mending on a woven garment?
Yeah, you can. I've done this type of mend also on like denim, different kinds of things. I don't have any samples of that in front of me, but yeah, you could definitely do that. And then I wanted to also show you that when you're mending, you don't necessarily have to do like weaving. You could do something like this, where I took a piece of wool, just like a piece of fabric, and then I did this sort of fly stitch around. So there's the hole there. So you can do something like that where you patch a hole with just fabric if it's something small and you don't really want to do the weaving. So there's lots of different alternatives.
Thank you. And a few people were wondering if embroidery thread can be an alternative.
I wouldn't for knitwear, but if it's something, you could definitely do this type of stitch on like a woven garment, but I wouldn't use cotton floss on wool fabrics. It won't. I just find it's a little too thin and a little bit kind of fussy. I also find it puckers too, because when you wash it, the cotton shrinks a little bit more. And you can also do different shapes. Like I did a square there. You could do something like this where it's round. So you can kind of go in a circular motion too. So there's the weaving.
Thank you. And can you repeat one last time what this type of mending was called for people?
It's called a weave mend.
Thank you so much. We'll let you continue.
Okay. So the next one is called Scottish darning. And I'm going to do it on this sweater here. Some people find this one a little bit easier because I'm just going to move my camera 1 second. I tend to want to go back and I feel like I'm going off camera. Some people find this one a lot easier because you don't have to do the structure. You're basically starting from the top and then you work your way down. And okay, so I'm going to just switch to a different yarn, a little bit heavier so that you could see it. So this one is the more of like a worsted weight yarn. And what you want to do is you want to do the same thing. You want to kind of start with a few of the seed stitches at the top. So I'm just going to do a couple rows.
As you're starting, a few people were asking how you chose the specific fiber you're using to mend with.
It's all just personal taste. I just like the color and the weight. This is about as thick as I'll go. So worsted weight is something you could find easily, like in a yarn store. So this is like yarn. It's not like a mending wool. And because it's on the body of the sweater, I'm doing a mend with 100% wool. I'm not worried about the stretch. So for example, if I'm doing a sock, I'm going to want to do it with the other yarn that has a bit of other fibers in it, that has a little bit of polyester in it, because it gives it a little bit more of a stretch. So this one here is a sock yarn, and I would do this on an area that has a lot of stretch. So for example, an elbow or a heel, any part that, you know, has some movement. So like this is a heel on a sock. I like yellow, don't I? I use a lot of yellow. Anyways, this is a sock yarn. And so this is like an area, this is like a heel. And you're going to want something that is got some stretch in it, because that's just the way our foot is. And I'm choosing a lighter weight yarn. So this is like a sock yarn. It's a very similar to the same weight. So that's how you kind of try to match it, is the same weight. So let's say if you have like a cashmere sweater, you could see, like, this was for a demo purposes, but you could see on this cashmere, this is quite heavy looking. So you might not want to use a worsted weight yarn. You're going to want to use something a little bit more of a lighter weight, like the sock yarn. You can see the difference. So it's really, a lot of it is to do with aesthetic choices. Like some people might be like, okay, well, I don't mind that. If I do that on an elbow on a cashmere sweater, it'll look like a big patch and I'm okay with it. So there's no like specific rules when it comes to mending. It's a lot of it has to do with just your personal choice. The only kind of rule of thumb that I go by is to use the same content fiber for the whatever item you're using. So I wouldn't use cotton on a wool sweater. That's the only kind of rule of thumb in my own head. But even then, that's not set in stone. Like if you want to do that, then do it. It's totally fine. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Several people were also wondering how you tidied up the hole. How do you tidy up the hole to not make it bigger by mistake?
I guess you just gotta be careful. I mean, I when I'm snipping it, if it does go a little bit bigger, it's okay. You just want to make sure it just, you don't have anything in the middle. That's all. Like you're not going to make this hole. You're not going to clean the actual hole. The hole on this is pretty much, I've left it the way it is. You just don't want like bits of, you know, like bits of sweater or anything like that in there. Trying to find a hole that has that example. But you know what I mean? You just don't want to, you don't want to make it bigger or anything. You just want to clean it so there's no bits of string or thread. You know, to your own discretion. Some people leave all those things on there. Okay. So I'm going to just do one more row here. Okay, and then I'm going to do the string just like before. Like that. Anchor it on this side. Okay, and then I'm going to come over here so I'm close to this line here. Now I'm going to start the stitch. Okay, so what you're doing is, you could see, you want to create like a U. To see how I'm creating like a U with my thread there? So what you want to do is, this is like your working thread, and I'm going to anchor it to this. I don't want to anchor it to this working thread, because if I anchor it, you can see this will pull it down and then expose that part of the hole. So if I anchor it to the top part here, then this part here will get covered. So I usually say under 2 and then over this one. and then I go down. I pull just down towards me. So to do it again, you do like a U shape. And the reason why you do this U shape is that you know that your hand is up here at the top, so you're coming down for the stitch. So I'm going to go under these two, actually this one I'm doing under two, and then over this one, and then pull. You should get something that looks kind of like a blanket stitch. So just keep making your U shape so that you know which direction. And it's a good stitch to do. And if you want to do this on a sock or an area, just go with a lighter weight yarn. I've seen people do it with really thin yarn. It looks really pretty. And this one is kind of fun too. You could switch out colors. So like I could do a row of this yellow, then I could do another color. You have that kind of freedom to do that. So under two and over the one. And then once you get over to the side, you're going to anchor on the side here. And then I'm going to go across and create that working thread. Anchor it to the side. And then come back. And make sure this is taut. It's not too saggy. Okay, so you're going to create your U. So I'm going to go underneath the bottom row of what I just created, and then underneath the working thread, and then on top of this one. The reason why I create kind of the U shape is because I always remember like how I'm going through the loop, because a lot of times you kind of have a loop that's created and then I'm like, do I go through it? Do I go over it? And I find it really confusing. And so I find if I do this U and I place the thread like this, then I know exactly like once I pull it, it's going to create the knot that I want. And you could see that this builds up pretty quickly, and you don't have that kind of working thread that you're doing, and then you can kind of be more mindful of your tension. And then I'm going to go anchored on
What
the side.
types of garments do you tend to use this type of mending for?
All kinds. I mean, you could do that on a sweater, and if you do it on a sock, I would just go with a thinner yarn. I wouldn't choose something this thick because you'll feel it. But any garment, any type of garment works well. Everything that I'm showing you, it works well on a lot of different things. But mainly this workshop's just focused on darning. And then if you're in Ottawa, I'm doing an in-person patchwork workshop on the 1st of March. So you can come by and learn about patching, which is more mending on wovens. So under two, over one. And so you could see it's quite quick. I'm already almost at the end of the hole. And I don't have to go back, right? So I've kind of started from the top, and then I don't have to go back and weave it in like I did with the first one. And this one here, I thought I would run out so I could show you, but I could just, maybe when I get to the other side, I'll switch and I'll show you how I switch. So as long as you do, I guess it's kind of like a C more than a U. If I pull it over to the side here, so it's more like a C. I guess a C when it gets shorter. So actually, I might not do another, oh no, actually I'll do another row because I want to show you how I finish this off too. Because do you see how there's a little bit of an arching that's happening? So when we finish it off, we're going to stitch it so that the arching gets, so this actually gets pulled down. So I'll show you that. So let me just show you how I switch, so you know when you run out. So so let's say this is getting quite short, and I don't really want to. I don't think I'll have enough to do a whole row. So I just do the same thing as I did before. Just going to leave that there, and then I'm going to leave the string like this. And I'm just going to cut myself a new piece. And then what I do is I kind of come back from the same spot. So wherever I ended off, so right there, that stitch, I go back to that area. And then just leave a little tail. And just be mindful that you don't pull too tight because this hasn't been anchored yet. So you don't want to be pulling the thread through. So I'm going to do my last row and then I'm going to show you how to anchor down.
With this technique, if you run out of yarn, what do you do?
What I just showed you, that's what you do. So
Perfect.
so this is the end of the tail. So I'm leaving it dangling here. You could trim it too if it's too long because sometimes it gets caught. And then this is my new one that I just added. So I just basically start it from where I ended off.
Wonderful.
Okay. So this is my last row. And if you find that your tension is a little bit loose, what you could do instead of going like every stitch, like what I've been doing, you could skip. So instead of going through this one, you can go through this one. You can skip. And then that will kind of help to kind of tighten it up a bit if it's a little bit too loose. Okay, and so I'm gonna anchor this. And basically what I do is to finish off at the bottom, I go underneath and I catch a loop like this, and then I pull it down, and then I do a stitch. Then I go underneath. And I give it a tiny, like a gentle like pull, like that, just to kind of make sure that it's, so there. And this is anchoring the edge. So the entire hole is protected. Basically what you're doing when you mend a hole like this, you're preventing the hole from getting bigger. So you always want to work on sweaters that, or garments that don't have a hole yet. You want to do preventative measures, but sometimes that's unavoidable. But so this is what you're doing is you're basically creating a patch around this hole, and then hopefully that will prevent that hole from getting larger. So essentially that's what you're doing. But because the stitch you're going across like row by row, you could change the colors as you go, which is kind of nice. Okay, so this is the last one. So I'm gonna go and then I'm gonna do a couple of rows of running stitch. Oh, there it is. I'm going to take this off. And then you do the exact same thing. You're going to take this, thread it to the back. And you can see there's the original hole. So it's all attached around. You can see there's about 1/2 inch. So that's where all the stitching started around the hole. I'm never going close to the hole. And then there's the patch on the other side. So I'm going to pull this through. And then just thread it through the back.
There's some questions about once you've done a mend, is there a risk that the edges of the hole will still want to try fraying?
No, not if you do it with 1/2 inch border. If you do it right on the edge of the hole, yes, it will fray and come apart. So you want to give yourself a little bit of distance. So this will not come apart at all. Like if you pull on it, like you could see I'm pulling on it, nothing is tugging on the actual part of the sweater. And that's why the seed stitches are important, because the seed stitches are like anchoring stitches. It kind of makes it a little bit stronger. If you don't do the seed stitches, then there is a chance that this stitch will come out, but with the seed stitches, it doesn't. I also wanted to show you this sample here that I kind of started. Like let's say you have a cuff that needs mending. So you're going to do the exact same thing. And then this is like the edge of the cuff here. So you're doing a very similar kind of stitch. This stitch would work too on a cuff. But yeah, sometimes you need that on a cuff, or not even just the cuff, like the bottom of the sweater. Sometimes it frays. So you can kind of reinforce it with the weave mend with this kind of stitching. Okay, just checking our time. Wow, that went by fast. So I have one more. I'm just looking at the time. It's almost 7:30. My goodness. My goodness, Jessica, that went by fast. Any questions so
I
far?
know. Time passes very fast when you're having fun.
Yes.
Yeah, let me look at some of the questions. So there were some questions around if you have a garment where you want both sides to be visible, such as a scarf or something like that, is what type of mending do you recommend for that?
I mean, you could do the weave mend, but then, I don't know. It's a good question if you want it to be visible on both sides, because a lot of the times when I do it, it's kind of works like a patch. I mean, let me see how this looks on the other side. Yeah, it works like a patch. I don't know. You're always gonna, I think, have one side that is more finished looking than the other. If anybody has any suggestions, I've never encountered that situation. That's why I'm not sure. But that's a really good question. Maybe I will try that on.
Good question.
It is a very good question.
Yeah. Um, Other questions. So, several people were wondering, with kind of a t-shirt, what type of mending do you recommend for that?
I actually have I have that on my Instagram, on my reels. I have one for like little tiny holes. I mean, there's the whole world of mending. There's so many different techniques and stuff. And we're only covering one small fraction of it. So that's what I would do, is maybe have a look at that, or maybe message me on Instagram and I could send it to you, because I know I have like almost 400 reels, so it might be a little daunting to search through it. So if any of you who are interested in the t-shirt one, just send me a message and I'll send you a link to it. And I think that will help you. It's a really quick, it's like a 1-minute video, but it does show it really well.
Thank you so much. One last question before we move to the next one. Can you repeat the name of the mending technique we just used?
That one's Scottish darning.
Thank you so much. We'll let you continue.
Okay. trying to see which sock would be better. So you can see this sock here. These are commercial made socks compared to the other socks that I had that were hand knitted. And I don't knit them. Oh my gosh, I wish I was a knitter. I think this one's a good one to show you. So you could see this is on the heel. So there's the heel there. And you could see that it's wearing out. And you can see on the socks, it's two main areas. I call this like your paw, the paw of your foot, and then the heel. Those are the two areas that are the most, that are the first to go. Same with this one here. Okay, so this one's a really good one for that. I think this one's a good one because you can kind of see the shape a bit more. This one here is called a blanket stitch. And I love this stitch. What's really great about this stitch is that it's flexible. And you need it to be flexible because that's the part when you're wearing it, it's a very flexible, like you're bending and also the elasticity of, because a lot of commercial made socks, they have a lot of elasticity. And because I'm using mohair, I'm going to switch to a little bit finer needle. So this is the one that I've been working with. Sorry, I keep hitting this and it shakes it. So you can see the difference between the two. So I'm going with one that's a little finer. And part of the reason why I'm going a little finer, not just because I'm using mohair, but because this sock is a little bit thin. And the last thing you want to do is create a hole when you're trying to fix a hole. So, okay, so this one, you're going to work in a circular motion. And it doesn't have to be, when I say circular, it's like, sorry, I'm having trouble threading this because it's so furry. You don't have to go, like, you don't have to make a circle per se. It's just you're going in a circular motion. So you're not, so we've been working up, top to down, but this we're going to work in the round. And so what you're going to do is you're going to start on the outside, the area that doesn't have the worn area. So I'm going to start over here. You're going to go in like this. And it's almost very similar to what we were doing with this Scottish yarn. So I'm going to put my thread here, and then I'm going to create a stitch, and then I'm going to go up. And as I go up, it creates a little lock. I don't know if you could see that. It kind of creates almost like a corner. Okay, and that's what the key is, the blank stitch. So I'm going to go like this. I'm going to keep that string in front of me and pull it, and this keeps snagging on my elastic, which I probably don't need. I'll just pull it down. And then I pull it up. So I keep going like this. And I'm telling you, you will not feel this. I have washed this, and mohair is so strong. It's so lovely. A lot of places now will sell little bits of mohair, because it's so popular now for mending. You can get like little bundles of it. Like a lot of like stores, like, oops, sorry, I'm off camera. They come in little tiny bundles like this. A lot of stores that sell mending things will have it. Or if you have a friend who's a knitter, ask them for all their little scraps of mohair. I think the mohair was the hardest thing that people had hard time finding. So you could see him going around in a circle, circular motion. The reason why I keep trying to see, like, this isn't a circle. This is kind of like egg shape. I just didn't want you to think you have to make a circle. And this will prevent your area that's wearing thin from thinning even further. Okay, so I really want to finish this one. So I'm going a little bit quicker, but I think you get the idea. The only thing about mohair that I don't like is it starts to twist together like this. I hope that's the right one to click. So if you're in the Ottawa area, come and join me to do some patching. And there's going to be a store called Fabrications that's going to be there to sell like some mending supplies. They might have some mohair. But they're an Ottawa-based fabric store. Those of you who are joining us from Ottawa will know them probably. Okay, so now I've done my first rotation. So what you're going to do now is you're going to start, and it's hard to see the colors, you're going to start actually in between. And as you get tighter in the circle, you might start to skip. You might not go like every one, you might skip every other one. It's very free form, so you'll understand as you're doing it. But because this is still kind of a wide circle, I can go every other one. And this one, I'm going to definitely run out of yarn. So I'm going to show you how that gets fixed, because there's a very specific way that you have to. Okay, do you see how, I hope you can see it. Do you see how there's a loop? And then if I pull this, the loop stays down. So what you're going to do is you're going to go on the other side of that loop to almost anchor that corner. And then you're going to slide your needle down. And then you're going to pull it. And that's going to anchor that corner. And you're going to snip this. I'm going to get some more yarn. Maybe a good idea with the mohair is to not work with too long of a, like, look at the length here. It's not even an arm's length, because it gets tangled up because it's so furry. And then what you're going to do is when you go back in with your new thread, you're going to go back to that same spot where you left off. So I'm going back in that little corner. Okay. So then I'm going to keep continuing now.
While you're working, there are several questions about needles. Some people were asking, do you choose a needle that has a sharp tip, a more rounded tip, and is there any numbers of needles that you prefer working with?
Definitely dull, because they're darning needles, right? So darning needles are not sharp. They're a little bit sharp, but they are not meant to, yeah, so they're definitely not sharp. And the size that I tend to use, I think I gave you a list of the sizes. I can't remember, but I think it was like 15, or was it 22? Do you have that on you, Jessica? I can't remember off the top of my head.
1 second, let me double check.
Like this one that I got from Tulip. Tulip is a Japanese company, and they come with like, I have a bunch of needles in here. They come with like usually 3 or 4 sizes, and I thought they were fantastic. So
You recommended sizes 14 to 18.
18, okay. So within that range, but you can definitely do like, I've used 22, which is a really good size too. But if you see this and it's made by Tulip, I find that the range they have is perfect. So this is a really good one to get. You could just type in like in Google search like Tulip darning needles, and that will come up. But needles are so inexpensive, and it's, just try like whatever you have on hand, just try a couple of needles, and then you'll find ones that are like your favorite. and they're, you know, easy enough to find. And we sell the ones that I like too online, but any of your local sewing store will have it. So now as you're looking at this, you're going, Arounna, this seems really kind of open. How is that going to cover that area? But you'll see that when I take it off, it actually will decrease and shrink. Okay, so I'm almost there. So I'm going to stop and get some more thread so I can finish it off. And you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to take the tail and you're going to weave it in.
Several people were asking if this specific type of stitch is only good when the hole is not yet fully a hole and
Yeah.
it's just worn out, or if it works if there's a hole.
If you work it with a hole, you just got to go a little closer, like a little tighter, and with a thicker yarn. But you could definitely do this with a hole. But I prefer using this on a hole that hasn't been created. That was the same thing with this stitch, the one that I didn't show you, the duplicate stitch, the Swedish darning. That one works really well when it's getting a little threadbare. When you do it with a hole, it's really hard. And I've seen videos where people do it, and most people can't do it. Like the people who are doing the videos are experts in it. And I find people who are new to mending have a really hard time doing that stitch with a hole. Okay, so now I'm getting close to the center. And so I just keep going until the hole gets really tiny. Okay, so it's pretty small now. Okay, I'm gonna pull that through. And then when you take it off, you could see that it actually kind of shrinks down a little bit from the stretch. And then when you pull it every which way, it doesn't break. It's very flexible, this stitch. So it's really good for that area. And then the mohair feels really nice on your feet when you're wearing it. But yeah, that's why I like this one, because it has all that stretch. Another, if I can show you quickly, another stitch that you could try if you don't want to try the blanket for this kind of area where it's.
I'll just let people know. So we have about 20 minutes left. So it's a good time to put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible.
So you could do this with a mohair or even with a sock yarn, it will work. I want to show you this one's a really good one for if you don't want to do that kind of stitch. This one is called a back stitch. So you're just trying to reinforce that area. So a back stitch is really easy. So you're just going to go kind of forward. And you can see I went back here, a little tiny stitch. Then I go forward a stitch. And then this stitch is also very stretchy because it's a back stitch. It's like it's looped back. So when you pull on it, it's very bouncy. So then when I do the next row, usually what I do is I kind of go in between. So I stagger the stitches. And then what it's doing is you can't tell from the front. Let me just show you when I finish this row. Because I think Jessica wanted to leave 15 minutes if there's questions or if there's any.
There's no rush. You're welcome to continue with this. I'm gonna ask questions as we go.
Okay. Just gonna do one more row. So this is just a quick way to kind of reinforce. You don't have to, doesn't have to be just on the sock. It could be on an elbow. It could even, this would work really well too, like on leggings. I used to do this on like the inner thigh of leggings. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the front, but on the back, do you see? And that's what gives it all that strength. So you have that extra little bit, and then it's really stretchy. So if you pull on this, see? It has bounce because of the back stitch. So this is really good for leggings because leggings have a lot of stretch. So that's what it is on the other side. And then this side, all you see are like little seed stitches. So this is a really good one too, to reinforce holes. And then you have all that thread underneath that is in between you and your shoes. So that's what I have to show you. Those were the, well, I guess 4. You got 4 stitches. I've done this also, if you look at my Instagram, where I did this stitch, where I patched, like I took some remnant sweater material and I put it underneath a hole of an elbow, and then I attached it using this stitch. So have a look at that. Yeah, I think that's all I have to show you. And does anybody have any questions or?
Wonderful. Yes, we have a lot of questions, so we can look at some of the questions that have come up. Something that has come up repeatedly is, could you again talk a little bit about what you do with the tails? Do you tuck them in? Do you weave them in? What do you do with the ends?
Yeah, so I weave them in. So like the tail that's here, I weave them right into the actual garment. So I usually just thread this, because the thing is, if you were to cut this off right now, then it's going to come undone because the stitching kind of ends there. So you just want to leave a little bit of a longer distance from where you came up. So I usually kind of weave it into the back like this, and then I clip it. So the original part where it came up is up over here. So then this, and then when it gets washed, you won't even, it'll just be part of it. Oh, that was the front. I guess it doesn't matter. But yeah, I weave in.
Thank you. Another question that has come up repeatedly is, do you have suggestions for mending either cuffs or edges rather than something that's in the middle of a garment?
This one here, I'm not sure if you saw this one. This is how I usually do a cuff. I don't have, I do have a cuff video on my YouTube channel, but I don't have a sample of one, but it's pretty much like this. And I just use the weave mend right across the edging. So you can use the same type of stitch for the edging.
Thank you. Several people have asked, what's the best method for patching the toes of socks?
I would do the same thing. I would actually, maybe it might be better to use this one because it's a little softer. I would do this one. And then all you're going to have is like, you're going to just do closer stitches for the end. And there is a darning mushroom. I don't know if you've ever seen the darning mushrooms that look like an egg shape, and then they have this weird little sort of pointy end. That little pointy end is what is meant for like gloves and inside toes and stuff. Usually toes, I usually use like an egg, a darning egg, which is basically like a wooden egg, because it's just fits better in that sort of shape. So I would get that or find something really round and small. But any of these stitches would work.
Thank you. People were asking too, do you sometimes use a mending loom?
No, I don't like those. I mean, I'll use them, but they're so expensive. I find them not really worth the price. Like I find just doing it on a mushroom or just doing it over something is just better. I find them kind of gimmicky.
Thanks for sharing. I'm looking for more questions. All right. There were some questions about your book. You mentioned that there's 2 editions of your books. Are there differences between them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the yellow one is the most recent one. So this one has less projects, but more techniques. So I think there's like a handful of extra techniques. So the one with the white cover has more projects and less techniques. So it kind of depends on what you like.
Thank you. And some people were asking, like, if they're looking for more advanced techniques and exploring more in depth, do you have recommendations for resources? I imagine your book is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, when you say advance, I mean, you just kind of do a lot, like there isn't you know, like once you learn all the techniques, which is what I show in the book, I mean, different ways of being a little bit more advanced is like how you use the color and like the different kind of weaves. Like I was mentioning, like people can play around with different kinds of weaves, and then you can try like the Swedish darning, which is a little bit harder. So there's a few, you know, things like that that you can try for sure. Um, but it's a lot of fun. It's, you know, a lot of experimenting. And I like the visible mending because you don't need a lot of special equipment. You know, it's just a needle and thread, and you can do so many different things and play with color.
Mhm.
But
And
definitely
some, yeah,
there's so much out there. I mean, if you search visible mending on YouTube or on Instagram, there's so many people doing it.
there's so many
Maybe,
techniques to try.
yeah, there's so many different
Mhm.
techniques. Maybe you could try invisible mending. That's kind of hard. That would be a really good one to try to make it so that you can't find where you mended. That would be a nice challenge.
Thank you. Um, Someone asked, is there a hole that is too big to mend?
No, never, never. It was really funny. I get these videos sent to me sometimes by my husband where there's these you know, younger people, and they're selling like really worn out things, like to the point where it's like unrepairable, and that's how they like wearing them. Like definitely if it's like a Carhartt or something like, you know, Levi's denim that's kind of old, and like they'll have a jacket that's literally threadbare, and they're selling it for thousands of dollars. So like you don't even have to repair it, just sell it to those kids. I just think it's crazy. Every time I see it, I'm like, how much are they charging for that jacket? I was thinking, I guess I don't even have to repair things anymore. I could just have things that are
Repair or enjoy the wearing of the clothing?
yeah. I think it's really up to you. When things get to the point where they are not repairable, like if the hole's too big and I think it's too much work to fix it, I usually just cut it up and it becomes parts for other mending. So it still gets used somehow, like it's not ever tossed. But I always use it, and I, you know, use it for demo or for just repairing other parts of other garments.
Thank you. Um, there were several questions about, so when you have a bigger hole, if the hole is bigger than a darning mushroom, do you have suggestions for how to help and stabilize it while you're working on it?
Well, usually for the darning mushroom, what I usually do is I'll like, if the hole is bigger, like let's say for instance, like this sock here, this hole is really kind of big. Usually what I do is like I'll like repair it and then I kind of move it down. But for a lot of stuff that I have done, like I did work on an elbow that was really, really big, and I just used like a mason jar. So I slid a mason jar inside. So it's, you know, like in there, and then I just put an elastic on either side so it didn't move. But yeah, like you can use stuff like that. That works really well, like a jar.
Thank you.
A mason jar top works really well too. Somebody showed it to me, a student. You know the little rings that you get on the mason jar? You can place that underneath the hole and then put the elastic around it. And it kind of works a bit like a hoop, but it doesn't have that stretching that the hoop needs. Because you know how the hoop needs to stretch over the center hoop and then the outside hoop. So yeah, try that. Like the ring of a mason jar, just put an elastic around it.
Great ideas. You showed earlier quickly some of the kind of patching that you've done for knit garments, like adding pieces.
Oh
Can
yeah,
you show that again and
oh
say
yeah,
how
yeah.
you do that? Yeah.
Just this one here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this one was just like a piece of like wool that I did a fly stitch around. And there's a Instagram reel on how I did that too. Yeah. So you could patch it. There's no reason why you can't patch. That's why when people ask like, you know, what should I use? What should I do? I find like it's hard to give an answer because there's no like hard and fast rules. Like there's no reason why you can't patch a sweater, you know, things like that. I wanted to show you this mend here. This was like the same one that I did on the sock, but some of you were asking about how it works for the hole. So this is done the exact same way, the blanket stitch. And then I just kept going around until it got smaller. So the same way. So just use like a thicker material.
Thank you. I'm going through for some questions we haven't answered.
This was
Any a basic question, but an important one. Any tips for threading the needle and not fraying the yarn as you're doing that?
okay. It's really hard to do it.
Mhm.
I remember like when I was doing a workshop that I spent a good time just helping people thread. Okay, so when you're threading something like this fuzzy, what you want to do is you want to squeeze it on the tip like this. I don't know if you guys can see that. And then put the needle right like this, and then it goes through. So you don't want it to be like long like this because then you have a hard time. You want to really go right to the end and you pinch it and it just pushes through. See, like that. Sometimes also when you're trying to thread it, I find instead of starting at the tip, what you could do is go like this, create like a loop like that, and then same thing, pinch it, and then push it through. And there. So rather than starting at the end, kind of fold it a bit. Let me show you that again. So you're folding it, and then I pinch it, and then squeeze it through, and there. I find that sometimes that works because then if you try to do it at the tip, it might be hard because it's all frayed. And then of course, you know, you can get like things like this, you know, these things that are for threading. They have a little hook on the end and they go through the eye like this, and then you can just pull it through. So these are really good to have.
Thank you. I think we'll do, so there was several mentions of, have you used felting to mend?
It's in the book. I don't know if it's in this book. Let me just check. Yeah. So I use like needle felting.
Hmm.
I've done this also. I don't know if you know the girl up slippers. I've done it on the girl up slippers because you always get like holes in the toes and stuff, and that's on my YouTube as well. And then last year, I think I did a little heart. I think it's on the sweater. I always like to do a heart theme this time of year. It's kind of cheesy, but I like it. Is it on this sweater? I guess it's not on this sweater. I can't find it. But anyways, it's a little felted heart shape. It's on.
Great. So if people are wanting to learn more about felting, either your book or some of your videos probably can be
Yeah.
helpful for that.
Needle felting is really great for mending. But the thing that you have to remember is sometimes it can get a bit dense. Like it's not a soft thing. So it's great for something that is like that hat or the girl up slippers, you know, like I don't know if it would work really well on something like a cashmere sweater.
Hmm.
That would be a good one. For remember the question earlier about the both sides? That would be a really good one, the felting, because you
Yep,
would see it on both sides and it would be the same.
that's true. That's a good option. And some of
Hmm.
the participants had good suggestions for doing it on both sides.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so there was a nice conversation in the Q&A at the same time.
Oh, good. Do they see that when the video is on YouTube or no?
Not on YouTube, but so some of what people were mentioning was if you're doing the weave mend to, as you're doing it, try to make it even on both sides. So look
Oh, yeah.
as you're working to make sure that actually both sides look really nice as you're working. So
Yeah.
a few options, yeah.
Oh, great.
So we're kind of at the end of our time together. Was there anything you wanted to share with people before we close up?
No, thank you so much for joining me. I think this was such a nice, cozy activity for all the snow we've been getting. So thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Jessica, everybody there at the National Gallery. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if any of you are in the Ottawa area, come join us on March 1st. And all the information is on the website. And that event is also free. And all the supplies are included in that event. So yeah, come by and learn how to patch and do some sashiko with us.
Thank you. Yes, so the event on March 1st, it's included with admission to the gallery. So please, we hope if you're in the region that you might join. Thank you so much, Arounna. It
Oh,
was really a joy to work with you on this, and we learned a lot from watching you. So thank you so
great.
much.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
So a few just last little notes. So again, if you're wanting to come to the workshop, it's on March 1st. The information is on the website if you're in the region of Ottawa. Um, if you're wanting to follow the work of Arounna, you can go to the website buku.com or on Instagram at buku. And if you want to participate in more virtual workshops, there is one upcoming workshop in English on Wednesday, March 12th, and it will be a drawing workshop. You can also find that on our website. Finally, we would love to see what you created tonight, what you made, and so we are inviting you to share it on social media. You can use the galleries tags that you can currently see on screen, or you can share it in the Facebook event that was created for this workshop. Thank you to everyone who came this evening to make art with us. Thank you to Arounna, and wishing everyone a good rest of the day. Goodbye.